Hello and welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa was in the White House last week, intending to reset relations with the United States weeks after his ambassador to the country, Ibrahim Rasool, was expelled by the Trump administration following his comments criticizing the U.S. president and his policies. The U.S. had declared Rasool persona non grata, and he was given only a few days to leave. He eventually did and was met with a warm welcome when he returned to South Africa, hundreds of people showing up at the airport to greet him. Unfortunately, President Ramaphosa did not receive a warm welcome when he visited President Trump at the White House. Instead, in front of press from around the world and members of President Ramaphosa's delegation, as well as U.S. officials, the U.S. president presented his guest with widely discredited claims of white genocide in South Africa. He even played a video showing an exhibit during a protest of several crosses lining a road claiming they were burial sites for murdered farmers. At least Trump admitted he did not know where in South Africa that was filmed, but the video was from a 2020 protest after a farming couple was killed in KwaZulu-Natal province. At the time of filming, organizers said that they are an exhibit representing farmers killed over the years.
These are burial sites right here. Burial sites, over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers. And those cars aren't driving, they're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who was killed. And it's a terrible sight. I've never seen anything like it. Both sides of the road you have crosses. Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No. I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen. But okay.
I mean, it's in South Africa. That's where.
Just before the trip to Washington, President Ramaphosa had said that he aimed to recalibrate relations between the two countries amid growing tensions. He and President Trump were expected to engage in talks covering a broad spectrum of issues, including trade, security, and regional cooperation. Alas, the U.S. president relentlessly made his claims, even slamming a reporter who asked why it's appropriate to welcome white Afrikaners to the U.S. when other refugees like Afghans, Venezuelans, and Haitians have all had their protected status revoked.
We've had tremendous complaints about Africa, about other countries too, from people. They say there's a lot of bad things going on in Africa, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. When you say we don't take others, all you have to do is take a look at the southern border. We let 21 million people come through our border, totally unchecked, totally unvetted. They came from all over the world.
All of that encounter at the White House did not rattle the South African president. He later talked about how many were concerned he could have had a Zelensky moment with the U.S. president ambushing him. But President Ramaphosa's encounter had been nothing like that.
I do believe that our visit here has been a great success. We've been able to achieve what we set out to achieve re-engagement with the U.S. So all in all, I'm rather pleased. I go back tonight having a sense that we have done well. I know that many South Africans were filled with a great deal of concern and fear that we will have a Z moment and all that. That did not ensue. And I know that you yourselves as the media, you wanted to see drama and something really big happening. And I'm sorry that we disappointed you somewhat when it comes to that.
Joining us now is former Nigerian ambassador to Guinea-Bissau with concurrent accreditation to Cabo Verde and the deputy spokesperson of the League of Ambassadors, Ambassador John Usang is here with me in the studio. And joining us from Abuja is former Nigerian ambassador to South Africa and founding member of the League of African Ambassadors, Ambassador Manta Haruna. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having us.
I'll start with you, Ambassador Usanga. I mean, you saw the visit of the South African president to the White House. You saw how he was received by President Trump. You also saw the way the U.S. president, treated him. What do you make of President Donald Trump's leadership style? What can you say about that?
Thank you very much for having us once again. Good evening, my people. It is quite unfortunate that we saw what we saw because of the way things have turned out to be. I think that any diplomatic engagement that smacks of bullying is unacceptable. Why? Because in diplomatic engagements, you are supposed to treat each other with respect, knowing that each party represents a sovereign nation. But what we saw in that engagement was what I call diplomatic bullying or bully diplomacy, where one side was trying to coerce and intimidate and, kind of paint the other person black in the eyes of the world. That shouldn't have been the case. At any rate, the engagement that they had in the open was supposed to be an engagement where the president to president will have a private conversation. In diplomatic engagements, you have the presidents meeting privately and talking about certain issues, and then they hand over those other issues that they talk about to the experts to discuss and elaborate on. But what we saw was a circumvention of the whole process, which to me was aimed at, should I say, spoiling or bringing down the status of the president of a whole country in the eyes of the world. That, for me, is unacceptable.
Ambassador Haruna, what did you make of President Trump's welcome of the South African president and how that reflected on the rest of the world?
Thank you very much for having me and giving the League of African Ambassadors the opportunity to appear on the program. I must say that the visit of President Ramaphosa to the White House signifies what we call the Trump U-turn on the foreign policy of the United States. He has deviated markedly from the previous regimes that we've known of, and the modus operandi of the United States diplomatic machinery. He has said, without missing words, during his campaigns, that he wants to rebuild America. He wants to rebuild the America for the test of the Americans. And that was what he tried to do. And he tested that sort of waters with the president of Ukraine. When he receives Zelensky, he tried to muzzle Zelensky up and, reduce him to less than a local government chairman. That is what he also wanted to repeat with Ramaphosa. But thankfully, Ramaphosa is more experienced. He has been, apart from being a freedom fighter, he has been in the top echelon of the ANC, the African National Congress, before assuming the mantle of leadership as president of South Africa. So you could see that his response fitted the situation very well, and it rather, smeared President Trump. And he therefore received the kudos of most other leaders of the world, and particularly the African leaders. We are very proud of how he responded to that.
Right. So the main reason, why the South African president was in the US in the first place and speaking to President Donald Trump was, of course, the issue of the white farmers in South Africa. It appears that the US president is a bit, misconstrued what exactly was going on in South Africa. There's some distortion of his view of what is happening here. And, he was there showing, President Ramaphosa the pictures, some of them, just not correct pictures about what was really happening there. Why do you think that, this is? Why do you think he was so invested in what was going on in South Africa, especially with the white farmers?
Diplomatically speaking, President Trump is in sympathy with his right-hand man. If you recall that Elon Musk was originally a South African. So Elon Musk is now a very senior member of the Trump administration. His parents owned a farm settlement in South Africa. So most of what Trump was trying to show was that during the apartheid regime, there was, a disproportionate acquisition of landed property in South Africa. The whites had taken over most of the fertile lands and a very huge proportion compared to the blacks who won independence and had no sufficient fertile land to call their own. So there was some sort of realignment and reallocation of plots of land and farms, like, even though compensations too were paid, but Elon Musk and his co-travelers were not too happy about this turn of situation. So it's most likely that what Trump did was absolutely in sympathy with the white farmers of South Africa, but not in tandem with reality or what can be statistically proven.
I'll come back to you, Ambassador Manta. Just wanted to get the opinion of Ambassador Usanga here in the studio. The U.S. president obviously has no clear understanding of what is going on in South Africa. And as Ambassador Manta said, he was parrying to Elon Musk, who is his director of government efficiency and whose money, of course, helped him win the campaign, thanks to the influence it had. But how dangerous is it when a president pushes this narrative? He could have easily asked the South African president, what exactly was going on in South Africa, but he didn't. He chose instead to tell him, the person who is the president of the country, what is going on in his country without asking him anything.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate because it would appear as if President Trump went to that meeting with the full intention of making his point rather than to discuss on the cooperation for which Ramaphosa asked for the meeting. And it's very dangerous for the world because the world takes more or less directive from America. Whatever happens to America is what the world would like to duplicate. But when you see a president trying to push some kind of agenda based on misinformation, then it speaks volumes to, the role of the officers in charge of the things. How did he get his information? How was the information verified to warrant that encounter? I think that you don't go with preconceived notions for the protection of the people that you perceive to be at a disadvantage without, first of all, making an inquiries and verifying the source of that information. But when you go with a preconceived opinion and you treat the other party as if the other party is, you are approaching the matter in a condescending manner, then it calls to question what you are actually inciting. Because I see it as incitement, because that could cause a problem to the black people of South Africa, outside of South Africa and elsewhere, So I think that it wasn't very tactful in handling the matter. I should have left it for diplomats. We have had problems of xenophobia in South Africa, for instance. I don't think I've ever heard any of very top government officials in the person of the president, for instance, interfering. They've always allowed diplomats to do their work and do the proper engagements necessary to, streamline this, because diplomacy is all about what are the facts, what interests are you pushing, can we reach a point somewhere. If you come with this kind of attitude, it's an attitude that can create problems and disaffection among the people and lead to more problems than we can solve. So I think that it could have been more tactful in handling the matter, or leaving it for the experts to handle, rather than trying to be the diplomat, the president, and the foreign minister himself. There's a role for the president in diplomacy. You receive the other president and you sit down and discuss issues communicated to you with the talking points. Leave the other nitty-gritty. You leave it for the experts to handle.
What do you make of President Trump's style of leadership and the way he's been relating with leaders from around the world? We've seen two very interesting cases. First, with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and now with the South African President, beg your pardon, Cyril Ramaphosa. What do you understand by the way President Trump has decided to go about, his leadership?
He has said that Americans will no longer waste money by shipping capital out. Secondly, he emphasized that America will not play for the Christmas anymore. So U.S. aid, for instance, are now being shortchanged in terms of funding. The U.S. aid, we know very well that they have been very active in the developing countries, and sometimes even accused of interfering in governance in developing countries. Sometimes also bringing about change of leadership in some of these countries. Americans have also found a way of disengaging substantially from the North Atlantic Organization. The NATO, which used to be a very huge instrument of foreign policy for the United States, is no longer that active. So these are all due to policies that Trump has shaped and is using to run the affairs of the world as it were now.
Well, thank you, for the background into, why the trade tariffs existed. I'd wanted you guys, diplomats, to really talk about, what sort of leadership style he's adopted this time around. But we'll leave it at that. What kind of lessons do you think that, African leaders who see, how President Ramaphosa has been treated in the White House, because there will be more visits, of course, from African leaders to the White House. What sort of lessons do you think that they should be drawing from this?
There's so much we have in Africa. Without Africa, the world cannot survive. Everything that the world uses comes from Africa for their technology. African leaders must begin to come together to fund research, fund education, fund development, even if it's not in our generation. Because what Americans are enjoying today is building on the foundations that were laid by their forebears. So what kind of legacy are we going to leave for the generations to come in Africa? It means if we don't do something to change the narrative, we are still going to grapple with this, and generations to come are still going to grapple with these issues. So African leaders should understand that they cannot deal with America individually, bilaterally. We must deal with America in a continental basis, and we must be able to start to do things for ourselves. Even the nitty-gritty things, little things like, coming together to forge relationships to open up the African market. For instance, aviation, maritime activities. Let's come together and begin to do things for ourselves. There's so much we can do among ourselves, because nobody's going to deliver anything for us on a platter of gold. The time comes for Africa to be delivered. And the first step of deliverance is realization that there's a need for us to begin to do things for ourselves. Because this style of leadership, if it continues and passed on to the successors, it's not going to augur well for Africa. The time has come for Africans to come together and do things for themselves. This is my standpoint.
And I notice that both of you are members of the League of African Ambassadors. Ambassador Manta, you are the founding member of this organization. You might want to intimate us on what exactly it's about.
African ambassadors, was birthed by ideas of a few of us sitting at a dinner table one time, and we said, look, most of the time, Africa tends to throw away the baby with the bathwater. Why not we form a pool of opinion that can facilitate the formation and pursuit of foreign policies in our various countries? There is no African country now that doesn't have a pool of so many serving and retired ambassadors. But when it comes to foreign policy issues, even though each government comes with a different method of pursuit, but the end result is the same, the best for the country. What can we get in our international engagement with our sister countries and other regional partners? So we now said, okay, if we can do that by harnessing all the serving and retired ambassadors to have a forum where we could marshal ideas that we can channel towards the foreign policies of the various governments, and which we can equally channel to the regional associations like the ECOWAS, ECOSOC, SADC, and the rest. Then we can have a corridor to reach to the AU. And fortunately, when that idea came, it met with a dynamic leadership. Ambassador Eminya, our immediate past Nigerian ambassador to Zambia, who also happened to have been the dean of the ambassadors from Nigeria, he bought into the idea and midwifed it to its present level. He channeled so much energy into it that even those of us that felt it would take a longer time to realize, we are dumbfounded when the realization came much earlier than we thought. So that was the driving force behind it. So he sent out flyers to the various ambassadors who were serving them in various countries for you to link up with the other colleagues that you are serving in the same place, because in each country you have, African ambassadors. They have their own forum and they meet. They have a dean that takes care of their affairs. So when we sent out the flyers to our colleagues outside, a lot of them bought into the idea, and like we said, so much water has passed under the bridge, and the rest is history. But let me conclude by saying that the AU has bought up the idea through ECOSOC. There is a committee in the AU they call ECOSOC, that's Economic Council, has bought into the idea and has even offered us a space for our secretariat in Zambia. So we are good to go.
So I suppose this is a pressure group, for the ECOWAS and for the African Union, Ambassador Usanga.
Yes, it is indeed a pressure group. But there's a resurgence of African nationalism, Africanness, and diplomats are usually at the forefront of, foreign policies of their different countries. And because of this resurgence in this Africanization of Africa, Africa for Africa, ambassadors and diplomats should not be left behind, because we are actually the voice of our various countries, and think experiences that we have acquired and relationships will come to bear in molding a critical mass of opinion for the African continent, so that it will be managed in such a way that Africa will derive the best benefit from it. It's not just about diplomacy. We're going to pass on a legacy to future generations by training and equipping them to represent Africa well in their various spheres of endeavor.
Ambassador John Usanga, thank you so much for joining us today. Ambassador Manta Haruna, thank you also for joining in from Abuja. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is where we end the program this week. Thank you for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. See you next time.